So I wanted to call this little piece Hometowns for Heroes, the more than 1 million soldiers fighting, but also the heroes of living everyday life through this terrible war. And maybe the idea for, rather than monuments, the best monument you can make, the best reward you can make, is to give people better everyday life to come home to. Of course, how can we talk about rebuilding when the destruction is still happening? And I feel terribly humbled. What can I possibly say to you? I'm sitting here in Sweden. My only experience was working with the rebuilding after the destruction of Christchurch after the earthquake. And although this is not anything as terrible as a war, people lost their homes, people were displaced. But what was important was when you asked people what they wanted, they could imagine something better. We gathered thousands of ideas from the people, and they imagined a city that was better than the one before the earthquake. They imagined a more civilized, greener, more gentle place. And I think this idea of imagining the future as being something better, that something good will come from this terrible war, is maybe the most we can hope for. And dare we even say something soft. And of course, it seems strange to talk about soft when you're in the middle of this hard, horrible war. But soft is like democracy. Soft is like peace. Soft is like creativity. So can we imagine what a soft city would be like? And the first example I think of is in Malmö in Sweden, where who would imagine the Swedish people dancing tango in the evening and sitting outside? If you go to the newspaper site, you will see also some terrible headlines about Malmö, because there are many other challenges there. But something about, if you give people a human scale, a gentle space like humanity, people can behave maybe in a better way, in a softer way. And this looks more like a village, although it's a city. The colors, the nature, the scale, just the smallness. Imagine rebuilding a new city in such a small scale, small like human beings, understanding the eye level of when you open a window, and that what it means for the mother, because the small space gives her overview. She feels relaxed, she feels in control, because she can feel that she can take, and she's more comfortable with strangers. And even the children, she can let her daughters go and sell juice to the tourists. There's a feeling of security in the neighborhood. There are hundreds of mothers and fathers at the windows watching. Was it they say, it takes a village to raise a child. This idea that together you can build a community in this small scale. The taste of nature, and just this feeling of being on vacation, the holiday feeling that maybe it's just Tuesday night, but you can take the family down to the public space and have, for a couple of hours, a feeling of being on a little mini vacation, 2 hours. You can see they've bought some pizza. They've bought the water is from the apartment. So they're just outside. They've gone outside to experience something that makes them a bit more comfortable. And even because they're Vikings, they jump in the water, they have a swim. And of course, it's very soft to walk around the neighborhood in your dressing gown. This is a very nice way to meet your neighbor, walking around in comfort. And even more impressive is when they leave the house. And if you remember the images I showed of the people fighting and the fires, the riots, people leaving the door open, because there's a village feeling, a feeling of trust. Because the cat wants to go inside and outside, they leave the door open when they go for a swim. And in this way, you could say that neighborhood is not just a place, it's a state of mind. Now, some of you are thinking, how chic, how cute, how can you tell us this? When Ukraine is suffering such incredible levels of damage, homes, whole cities destroyed. Also, with millions of displaced people and the confusion of moving to the other side of the country, forced to live in circumstances far from your family and friends, your own neighborhood. Again, the big challenges, and maybe the great challenge, the 1 million soldiers coming home through the horrors of war. How can they be comfortable? I mean, this PTSD, how can you make a gentle place to help people recover from the horrors of years of war? And I hope in some way that we can see this soft city could be partly a solution. Because when we look at this place, this is not just a picture of a piece of city. This is a picture of democracy, where different people share the same spaces, different ages, different ethnicities, groups and singles. It's also a picture of public health. The foundation of public health is always fresh air, exercise, meeting other people, being with other people. This is also a picture of public health. And somehow to imagine how this city can enable these healthy relationships to happen, so that you feel comfortable meeting other people in the public space. Those small little details, small things, which allows business to thrive, allows you to perform, to meet your neighbors in a comfortable way. Those little things, and this is the softness we maybe need to achieve to make people feel comfortable to believe in humanity again. This is the picture of Venice, boys playing football in the square, the supermarket in the background, the restaurant, all these things in the same place. So how we design a street, can we design a street to be friendly or open? It's maybe some simple things we can think about, how we open up and make people feel good about being a human being, sharing public spaces, enjoying the delight of being a human being. This is New Haven in Copenhagen, where the rich tourists have the most expensive glass of wine in their life. On the edge, the locals drink beer, and they bought in the local shop. Everybody's in the same space. It's the same sunset. It's the same water. It's the same music. This is in São Paulo in Brazil. It's just a window. It's a window into a dance class. But while you're waiting for the bus, you can watch people dancing, and it maybe takes you out of your problems of your everyday. You hear the music, and it's almost an invitation to join them. I could do that. I could be with them. And of course, we know that contact with nature is incredibly important for healing. The noise of running water, the noise of the leaves in the trees. Here in Stockholm, they've amplified the noise of the water and the leaves. So you hear the noises of nature and not the noises of the cars and the noises of machinery. And even understanding health, this is from the BBC, walking cuts breast cancer risk. They're just walking healthy everyday life. And this is another Swedish headline, loneliness is as dangerous as smoking. And how can we talk about it? Well, this is maybe the most boring picture of public life. In Switzerland, the men playing chess. And maybe you think this is not very exciting, but in this lonely world, these men, it gives them a legitimate excuse to be in the public space. They're watching the chess game. They've stopped. They have a legitimate excuse to have a conversation with a stranger. Oh, he played very badly. And this two people playing can be an invitation for people to stay. And in this kind of stressful, lonely world, this small event can be very important in helping build a sense of community and care. And so I'm trying to think, what can I say? I mean, trying to understand the needs of people after a war and the soft city that could be created. And what I've learned is the importance of fresh air, of being outside, of sunlight, of contact with nature. These are important. The opportunities for exercise and physical activity, for social contact. And of course, the sense of identity and the sense of security that a place can give you. And so I'm trying to think about how to offer those things. And of course, the challenge is very big. But I'd like to offer 4 maybe concepts, 4 values. And although the challenge is big, I'd ask you to think smaller, because human beings, we're very small and we're very sensitive. When we walk down the street, we smell, we touch, we hear, we see, and what around us. And of course, human beings are also very sociable. And we need to support, how do we support those things? And one question is, when we rebuild, how do we find the human scale? Like what scale? These are 4 pictures of the same density. So we can deliver density in different ways. But of course, do we make a more human environment? You know, the places we know, I mean, what around the world we call Soviet architecture, the scale which dehumanizes people, you know, whether it's the tower, the slab block, where is the space for humanity? And only as we get smaller, enclosure, when we get really small, we can get to the scale where we feel comfortable as human beings. And so thinking about this scale, and this idea of the courtyard, the simple courtyard, but it gives us protection in the noise of the city. It gives us a better microclimate, a little bit warmer in the winter, a little bit cooler in the summer. It allows us to spend more time outdoors because it's got a better microclimate. The acoustic space, the courtyard protects us from noise. And of course, that maybe gives us a quietness. It gives us a good night's sleep. One of the most basic things for recovery is sleep. And if you can sleep with an open window to the quiet courtyard, this is one piece of the puzzle of how to recover. And of course, the opportunity for children to play in a safe place. In 45 seconds, you can go downstairs into the courtyard and have a big, green, safe garden for the children to play in. And all the parents can watch the children as they're making dinner. It's a simple, banal thing, but it gives you a sense of security and comfort, having your family growing up in a protected environment. And of course, the courtyard also gives you a common space, an identity, a place to meet your neighbors, to share, to congregate. And so something very, very simple, but it connects you to where you are. So think smaller. And of course, we need to lift our viewpoint. We need to have high values. But again, the next thing I say is to think lower. Think lower, because how high do the buildings need to be? How long does it take you to go outside? Is it 45 seconds or 4 to 5 minutes? And if we want people just simply to be outside, to have this connection with their neighborhood, with their street, with their yard, the buildings need to be lower. And so can we again think about this eye level of what you see when you meet outside, and really taking care of the ground level and the opportunity to make lively streets where the buildings speak to the street, and every ground floor does something which speaks to the street. And especially now, sometimes people don't like the idea to live on the ground floor because they feel it's a little bit too public. But if we give people a little garden, a small garden outside their apartment, they have a sense of control. It's very practical. If you have children, they can play, the toys can be outside, you walk inside and outside. It's also a place where, you know, from your window to your little yard, you meet your neighbor and you have this opportunity to kind of engage with the people around you. And this very cheap, simple intervention, having a little garden on the ground floor, makes a huge difference in building community. And especially for those who will have disabilities, the idea to be able to live comfortably on the ground level and have good social contacts is also particularly important. So think smaller, think lower. And of course, I know you're going to have to work very fast, but thinking about slower. And everybody talks about this 15-minute city, you know, and what does that really mean? And we have to count every second of how we're connected with each other in time. And this is, for me, one of the simplest urban projects I know. This is and you're looking, what's this a picture of? I don't see anything. This is the Copenhagen time machine. And you can see the pavement, the sidewalk continues across the side street. And that means that when you're walking, you don't need to stop for the cars. You keep walking, and your 5-minute walk becomes a 3-minute walk because you don't have to stop. It means your children can walk to school alone because they don't cross the street. They can walk 12 blocks and never cross the street. It's a very simple system. Even the guy from the countryside who's never seen this before understands I have to stop. The dignity of the pedestrian goes first. So a simple thing which allows you to move more conveniently, faster in the city. Simple to understand. And the same thing, what can you do while you're waiting for the tram, waiting for the bus? Are you part of the city? Can you sit and drink your coffee and drink your beer while you're waiting for the bus to make the most? Every second that I'm waiting is my time, and I can use the time as I want. And the fact that when you move at eye level through the city, you're connected with the weather, with the place, with your neighbors, other people. You see what's going on and you feel part of society. And even on board the tram, that's a public space as well. And this is also an opportunity to meet. And if there's a little bit of space for the strollers, there's a space to have this little moment of connection. And so it's very easy in planning. We talk about TOD, and we have to build a tower next to the metro station. But the problem, when we build the tower next to the metro station, we connect you to somewhere else more interesting. So we have to think about mobility starting at your window. It starts at your window when you look outside. It takes you in your front door, down your staircase. It takes you to the street corner, to the bike lane, to the bus stop. And thinking about this very small scale of slowly going from your apartment outside. And this is going to be so important with so many frightened, damaged, frustrated people who've been through a war, to make them want to look out their window, to go downstairs, go down to the street corner. It's the first step towards that recovery. And finally, think smaller, think slower, think simpler. The simple things. Now, this is in Japan. This is one of my favorite urban projects. It's a hole in the hedge. Quite simply, next to the old people's home, the architects cut a hole so the old men and women could watch the young people at the school next door playing football. It's just a hole in the hedge, but it connects the old people to the young people. It doesn't cost anything. This is in Pontevedra in Spain. It's just some extra paint. When they painted the crosswalk, the pedestrian crossing, they used more paint to show that the pedestrian crossing is important. People crossing the street is important. It's just more paint. This is in Mexico. It's a piece of cloth. It's just a piece of cloth to protect you from the sunshine. So the old people can have a dance class outside. This one is in Malmö. It's a wall. It's just a simple stone wall, but it creates a microclimate so you can sit outside on a windy day. And in Sweden, it's very cold in the wind. But if you build this wall, these people can be transported maybe to the south of Germany or to the north of Italy because the climate becomes different. It's just a wall. And so if we can recognize these simple things we can do on the buildings to make some protection of enclosure, an arcade to protect you from the rain, a bay window so you can see the street, a balcony. And these simple things are very cheap. It's a very cheap thing to add to the apartment. A balcony, a cheap balcony, but it gives you an extra living space. It gives you maybe the most useful living space. You can have an extra living room, but it also gives you a connection to outside. And up to 3 or 4 stories, you can be speaking to the person on the street. So you're connected, you're invited to connect with your surroundings. And this is also from Switzerland. What are they doing here? Who would imagine the Swiss people walking around in their swimming costume? And because of climate change, it's getting hotter and hotter, 40 degrees in the summer in Switzerland. But what they made in Bern, they made some very simple concrete steps, and some red handle so that you can climb into the river and swim in the river. It's a very cheap intervention. It's a rich country, but it's a cheap intervention, which allowed people to cool down on a hot day. So simple, very, very simple things. Jan Gehl, he says, it's cheap to be nice to people. And so thinking about those things, you deserve a holiday. You want to go to the beach. Well, maybe the beach can come to you. It's only some sand and some chairs, and you can have a little bit of nicer life for at least an hour or two. So I ask you, you have huge challenges, and I don't know if I have the right to say anything to you, but with this big challenge, think smaller, lower, slower, and simpler, because I really sincerely believe that the greatest gift we can give to all of the heroes, the soldiers, but also all of you living through this war, is to have a better quality of everyday life. So think softer. I look forward to the days when they will be dancing in the streets of Ukraine because this war is over. And I'm very, very proud that this book has been possible. And I'm happy to share everything with you to make softer cities in the Ukraine. This is the most important translation of the book there is. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Величезне спасибі, пане Сімо. Колеги,
Thank you so
я
much. I would say that it was extremely valuable for me to listen to David and to think together with about how the natural environment can influence the recovery of people. And reconstruction is not about losing the building, bringing down the cortisol level in those that have PTSD, to help adapt people who have lost their natural, who are forced to move to different cities, having lost their entire. So thank you so much, David, for speaking, for adapting your presentation to our needs. And I have a question to the room. I wanted to ask you, familiar with TOD, transit-oriented development? There is a couple of people. So I'm just going to say that this is an approach, and the city planners offer and suggest that the workplaces and residential areas are built in close vicinity to public transportation systems. That's why there was to the subway line. Ukraine, it's a new concept, slowly gaining food, and we people closer to public transport, so movable. But that's enough. Owing to Mustafa, we will cut down the Q&A a little bit, but we will questions to David. I can up over there and another over here. Can we get some mics? You can see you have a mic.
Добрий день. У мене таке питання.
My question for you is as far we have an idea of how soft space cities, for instance, forming old residential areas. How do you transform old, big, bulk Soviet residential that were not in this humane scale? How do you do this for this?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. We have this challenge around the world. Even in other parts of the world, this modernist housing typologies exists, and it's a challenge everywhere. I mean, I've been working last year in Japan with exactly this question, and of course, often we don't have the resources. We can't afford to demolish these areas. So there are some maybe strategies you can make. One important thing is to work with the ground level, that working particularly with the ground level, introducing other uses, redesigning the ground level, maybe adding these little gardens on the edge, making the most of entrances. So we can, at least at eye level, we can make a better place. We can also maybe add new buildings to those areas, maybe in a more smaller human scale, and also improve the microclimate. One of a particular problem with those Soviet-style blocks is there's no street, there's no front and back. So the clarity of this is the street, this is public, this is where there could be noise, and this is the courtyard, this should be quiet, this should be private, is often not clear. So one challenge can be to reconfigure the buildings. So you make a structure with a clearer pattern of streets and public spaces and quieter backs. And sometimes that means putting the entrances on the other side of the building to create the courtyard, that protected courtyard. Because this structure, the simple structure of being clear, this is public and certain activity is appropriate, this is private. And now we behave in a different way, that this structure, I think, needs to be introduced. I think it's a big challenge also to bring other uses, commercial activity, employment into those monofunctional housing areas. That's also a challenge. And I think when you're planning, you should not only think about the buildings, but also about the life. How can we bring more different kinds of activity, like employment, like culture, like education, health, all those kind of services, more integrated into the streetscape, into the daily life of those neighborhoods. I mean, we could talk for one day just about this subject, so that's my short answer.
Величезне спасибі за відповідь. І друге питання.
Thank you so much for your answer. And we have time for one more question. Try to be brief and be eager to hear David's response. Hello. Question is very similar. This one, I live in a small town, around 10,000, and we have a Soviet planning, gray, daunting block, no leisure objects of high quality leisure infrastructure. So to ask you, what are fast steps of towns that could be taken within 1 year, so to say, implement the idea of city on a level at least?
Again, very, very, very good question. I think as I understand, if you look at the pre-Second World War cities of Ukraine, they're very European in character. The courtyard, this ground level, the roofscape, the human scale, the color, all of those things were there in the historical, and I think that European feeling. I'm trying to define this. I say it's European because for me there's a balance in being an individual and being in a community. If you have this huge architecture, it makes you feel like nothing. The individual is not important. The other extreme maybe is in maybe United States, where you have everybody's individual and there's no community. And for me, the essence of the European city is this balance that there's an individual, my family, my household, my home, but I'm also part of a community, a street, a courtyard, a neighborhood, a city. And that you can have this both and of being an individual, but also being part of a community. And I think the problem, of course, with this Soviet architecture is it doesn't let that happen. It's just big. And where's the space for the relationship between one and two people? So to explore how to reduce the scale, paint, some color, some individual opportunities, the simple changes to the old buildings, like the little front garden on the ground level, maybe adding balconies on the upper floor apartments. Some of sometimes of the Soviet blocks are lower, they're not so high. And because of the concrete construction, maybe you can build an extra story of timber, but also adding maybe smaller scale buildings, prefabricated buildings in the in-between spaces. And those small additions can also help define the space better. So you have a more clear pattern of this is the street, this is the square, this is the private courtyard, this is my completely private garden. And how to make small interventions like fences, like little walls, giving a front door, something as simple as a front door to the ground floor apartment, so they can have their own mailbox and their own entrance. They can paint the door their own color. So I think there's some simple things. I'm sorry, there's not time to give a longer answer. It's such an important question. I hope soon I can come to Ukraine and help work with you together on some of these challenges, because it's probably the most important work for the generation of architects living today.